Over the following week, Jake participated in daily neural interface sessions, each one deepening his access to the facility's systems while providing the Zephyrians with unprecedented data about human technological adaptation. He approached each session with genuine enthusiasm, allowing his fascination with their technology to mask his systematic exploration of security protocols and system vulnerabilities. During one particularly intensive session, Jake discovered that the facility's neural interface network was more extensive than he'd realized. Every Zephyrian in the facility was connected to a collective data-sharing system that allowed them to coordinate their research efforts with extraordinary efficiency. But that same network also presented an opportunity. Your interface capabilities continue to expand beyond theoretical limits, Senth observed as Jake navigated through increasingly complex system architectures. We are detecting neural pattern formations that suggest integration levels approaching those of our own species. It's like learning a new language, Jake replied, his consciousness split between speaking aloud and exploring the data streams flowing around him. The more I practice, the more intuitive it becomes. Through the interface, Jake could sense the mental activity of every Zephyrian in the facility. Their thoughts moved in patterns unlike human consciousness, more structured, more collective, but also more predictable. And in that predictability, Jake found a weakness. The Zephyrians were so accustomed to sharing information through their neural network that they had difficulty conceiving of deliberate information compartmentalization. When Jake accessed systems through the interface, they monitored his general neural activity but not the specific data pathways he was exploring. They assumed that his human curiosity would lead him to examine the most obvious and interesting systems, not that he would be systematically mapping security protocols and escape routes. Jake used this blind spot to gradually build a complete picture of the facility's operations. He identified the duty schedules for security monitoring, the automated protocols that governed emergency responses, and most importantly, the daily maintenance routines that created brief windows of reduced surveillance. The most crucial discovery came during his sixth interface session, when Jake gained access to the facility's master chronometer. The Zephyrians operated on a 37-hour cycle, with specific periods designated for different types of activities. Research operations ran for 28 hours, followed by a 9-hour maintenance period during which most research staff entered a rest state, and automated systems handled routine facility operations. During these maintenance periods, the neural interface network operated at minimum capacity, with only essential systems actively monitored. Security protocols remained in effect, but the number of active observers dropped dramatically. It was the perfect window for an escape attempt. Jake began using his neural access to subtly modify small, routine systems during his interface sessions. Nothing dramatic or immediately noticeable, just minor adjustments to maintenance schedules, slight modifications to security sweep patterns, and gradual changes to the environmental controls in certain sections of the facility. Each change was small enough to appear like random system fluctuation, but together they were creating the conditions he would need for the escape. Meanwhile, Jake's regular interactions with Keth and Vral continued to provide opportunities for intelligence gathering. The two young Zephyrians had become genuinely fond of their human subject, and their enthusiasm for the research sometimes led them to share more information than their security protocols probably intended. "Your species' technological intuition is remarkable," Vral commented as they toured the facility's power distribution center. "Most subjects require extensive training to understand even basic system operations. You appear to grasp complex technological relationships almost instinctively." "Humans are good at finding patterns," Jake replied. "We've had to survive as long as we have. Speaking of patterns, I've noticed that the facility's energy usage fluctuates on a regular cycle. Is that related to your research schedules?" "Affirmative. Research operations require significantly more power than maintenance activities. During rest periods, power distribution shifts to focus on life support and automated systems." Jake filed this information away. Reduced power during maintenance periods would affect security systems, potentially creating additional vulnerabilities he could exploit. "The power distribution network is fascinating," he continued. "I assume there are emergency protocols in case of system failures?" Multiple redundancy systems exist, Keth replied. However, the biomechanical nature of our power systems makes total failure extremely unlikely. What about partial failures? Say, if someone accidentally damaged one of the primary distribution nodes? Emergency protocols would isolate the damaged section and reroute power through backup systems. However, such incidents are rare. Jake smiled. I'm just curious about how you've solved these engineering challenges. Your redundancy systems are much more sophisticated than anything we have on Earth. Through these conversations, Jake gradually assembled a complete picture of the facility's vulnerabilities. The power systems, while robust, could be overloaded through careful manipulation of the neural interface network. The security protocols, while comprehensive, were designed around the assumption that all subjects would remain in their designated areas. And the emergency responses, while efficient, followed predictable patterns that could be manipulated by someone with inside knowledge of the system architecture. The final piece of the puzzle came during Jake's 7th neural interface session, when he discovered the location and access protocols for the facility's communication array. The massive crystalline structures he'd observed during his initial tour weren't just for interstellar communication. They also served as the facility's emergency beacon system, capable of broadcasting distress signals across multiple star systems simultaneously. If Jake could trigger the emergency beacon during his escape attempt, it would create massive disruption to the facility's operations while potentially alerting other Zephyrian installations that something had gone wrong. The confusion and misdirection would buy him precious time to reach the collection vessel and implement the next phase of his plan. Your neural activity suggests elevated focus on communication systems, Senth observed during the session. Are you experiencing particular interest in interstellar communication technology? It's incredible to think about, Jake replied honestly. The idea that you can communicate instantly across distances that light takes years to travel. I'm trying to understand the theoretical principles involved. The mathematics are complex, but the basic principle involves quantum entanglement networks maintained across multiple dimensional layers. Jake let Senth guide him through a basic explanation of the communication technology, using the opportunity to memorize the activation sequences and emergency protocols. When the session ended, he had everything he needed to implement his escape plan. That evening, as Jake sat in his quarters planning the next day's activities, he reflected on how much his situation had changed since his arrival. The Zephyrians now trusted him enough to give him unprecedented access to their most sensitive systems. They believed that his cooperation was genuine and that his fascination with their technology had made him a willing long-term research subject. They had no idea that their trust was about to become their downfall. Tomorrow's neural interface session would be different. Instead of learning about their systems, Jake would be turning those systems against them. By the time the Zephyrians realized what was happening, he and the other human subjects would already be on their way back to Earth. At least, that was the plan. Jake knew that escape attempts rarely went exactly as planned, and that he would need to be prepared to adapt to changing circumstances. But he also knew that this might be his only opportunity to break free from the Zephyrian facility before becoming a permanent resident of an alien world. The game was about to begin, and Jake intended to win. Jake woke 3 hours before the scheduled maintenance period, using the time to review every detail of his escape plan. He had memorized the routes to each human subject's quarters, the access codes for the collection vessel, and the precise timing required to coordinate multiple security breaches. Most importantly, he had identified the exact moment when the facility's monitoring systems would be at their most vulnerable. The plan was complex but necessarily so. Jake would begin by using his scheduled neural interface session to access the facility's central systems and implement the first phase of disruption. While the security teams responded to the initial chaos, he would free Dr. Chin, who would then help him liberate the other human subjects, while Jake secured the collection vessel. The most dangerous part would be the 47 minutes between initiating the escape and reaching minimum safe distance from the Zephyrian homeworld. Jake's analysis of their pursuit capabilities suggested that they would need at least 30 minutes to organize an effective response to multiple simultaneous security breaches, giving him a narrow window to get everyone off-world before facing organized pursuit. Today's interface session will focus on advanced system integration protocols, Senth announced when Jake arrived at the laboratory. We wish to evaluate your capability to manage multiple technological interfaces simultaneously. Perfect, Jake replied, settling into the interface chair. I've been hoping to explore more complex interactions with your systems. The neural crown descended onto his head, and Jake felt the familiar rush of expanded consciousness as the interface activated. But this time, instead of passively exploring the data streams, he began implementing the modifications he'd been planning for days. His first target was the facility's chronometer system. Jake introduced a subtle timing error that would cause the automated maintenance protocols to begin 17 minutes early, while simultaneously sending false signals to the duty rotation schedules. The result would be a brief period where the automated systems believed they were in maintenance mode while most of the security staff thought they were still in active research phase. Fascinating, Senth observed as Jake's neural activity spiked across multiple system interfaces. Your pattern integration is achieving unprecedented complexity levels. I'm starting to see how all your systems interconnect, Jake replied, using his growing access to plant the second phase of his disruption protocol. He carefully modified the power distribution network to create artificial load spikes in non-essential systems, which would trigger automated power conservation protocols and reduce energy flow to security monitoring equipment. Phase 3 involved the most delicate manipulation of all, introducing false data into the facility's threat assessment algorithms. Jake created artificial anomalies in the atmospheric processing systems that would suggest potential contamination in several sections of the facility. When combined with the power fluctuations, these anomalies would trigger emergency protocols requiring immediate investigation by technical teams. Your neural integration appears to be reaching theoretical saturation levels, Senth warned. Extended maximum capacity interface sessions can cause permanent neural damage. Just a few more minutes, Jake said, implementing the final components of his plan. I think I'm starting to understand something fundamental about how your consciousness interface technology works. Jake's last modification was the most crucial, a delayed activation routine in the facility's emergency communication array. Exactly 23 minutes after his interface session ended, the array would begin broadcasting a priority distress signal indicating catastrophic facility failure. The false emergency would draw response ships from across the star system, creating confusion and misdirection that would mask the collection vessel's departure. Disconnection procedures initiating, Senth announced. As the interface crown lifted from his head, Jake felt the familiar disorientation of returning to purely human consciousness. But this time, there was something different, a lingering sense of connection to the facility's systems, as if part of the neural interface remained active. That was extraordinary, Jake said, standing slowly and testing his balance. I feel like I experienced something fundamentally different from previous sessions. Your neural patterns suggest permanent integration elements, Keth observed with excitement. You may have achieved the first successful human Zephyrian consciousness hybrid state. Jake smiled, knowing that what they were detecting wasn't consciousness integration but the persistent access pathways he'd established during the interface session. Those pathways would allow him to trigger his escape protocols remotely, without needing direct physical access to the neural interface systems. I'd like to rest for a while and process what I've experienced, Jake said. That was more intense than anything I've felt before. Appropriate. Extended interface sessions require recovery periods for biological subjects. As Keth and Vrel escorted him back to his quarters, Jake noted the time on the facility's chronometer displays. 18 minutes until the maintenance period began and his escape protocols activated. 18 minutes to mentally prepare for what could be either freedom or death. Jake spent 15 of those minutes in apparent meditation, sitting quietly in his quarters while actually using his lingering interface connection to monitor the facility's systems. The timing modifications he'd introduced were propagating through the network exactly as planned, creating subtle but growing inconsistencies in the automated protocols. 3 minutes before activation, Jake stood and moved to the door of his quarters. When the iris tried to open, he would know that his security modifications had taken effect and the escape could begin. The chronometer display showed 30 seconds remaining. Jake took a deep breath, remembering every detail of the route to Dr. Chen's quarters, the locations of the other human subjects, and the path to the collection vessel docking bay. 10 seconds. 5. The door irised open without any security prompt. Jake stepped into the corridor and began running toward Dr. Chen's quarters, counting down the seconds until the emergency protocols would begin cascading through the facility's systems. Behind him, monitoring devices that should have detected his unauthorized movement were cycling through power conservation mode, their sensors temporarily offline. Phase 1 of the escape was complete. Now the real test would begin. Jake reached Dr. Chen's quarters exactly 4 minutes after the escape protocols activated, finding the normally sealed security door standing open. Emergency lighting had replaced the standard illumination throughout this section of the facility, casting everything in a red-tinted glow that made navigation more difficult but provided excellent cover for unauthorized movement. "Dr. Chen!" Jake called softly as he stepped through the doorway. She appeared instantly, dressed in the facility's standard subject clothing but carrying an improvised pack made from bedding material. "You did it," she said with satisfaction. "I felt the power fluctuations start 3 minutes ago, and the security barriers deactivated 90 seconds later. We've got approximately 40 minutes before they organize an effective response," Jake said. "Are you ready to move?" "More than ready." Dr. Chen produced a device that looked like a cross between a flashlight and a scanner, constructed from components Jake couldn't identify. "I've spent the last week preparing for this opportunity. My electromagnetic pulse generator will disable their monitoring devices temporarily, buying us additional time." They moved quickly through the corridors, following Jake's memorized route toward the detention areas where the other human subjects were being held. The facility's emergency lighting system was working exactly as Jake had hoped, bright enough to navigate by, but dim enough to hide their movements from the automated security cameras that were still functioning. The first subject they reached was Dr. Michael Torres, a marine biologist who had been collected 8 months earlier from a research station in the Gulf of Mexico. Jake's interface modifications had opened his security door, but the man was initially reluctant to believe that escape was possible. "This is insane," Dr. Torres said as Jake quickly explained the situation. "Even if we get out of the facility, we're on an alien planet millions of light years from Earth. The collection vessel that brought me here is still docked," Jake replied. "It has the range and navigation systems to get us home. But we need to move now. My intelligence suggests we have about 35 minutes before they lock down the entire facility." The next 3 subjects were located on the same level: Jennifer Walsh, a software engineer, Captain Maria Santos, an Air Force pilot, and Dr. David Kim, a theoretical physicist. All 4 had been planning individual escape attempts and were eager to join a coordinated effort with a realistic chance of success. "Where are the others?" Captain Santos asked as they made their way toward the central transit system. 3 more subjects on the upper levels," Dr. Chen replied. "Jake's modifications should have opened all the security doors simultaneously, but we need to collect everyone before heading for the ship." They rode one of the facility's transport platforms toward the upper levels, Jake using his residual interface connection to monitor the facility's status. His emergency protocols were working better than he'd hoped. Technical teams were responding to the false atmospheric contamination alerts, security personnel were investigating the power distribution anomalies, and the duty rotation confusion had left several critical monitoring stations temporarily unmanned. But Jake could also sense that the Zephyrians were beginning to recognize the coordinated nature of the system failures. It would only be a matter of time before they realized that the problems weren't random malfunctions but deliberate sabotage. The upper-level subjects were waiting for them: Dr. Rachel Green, a geologist, Staff Sergeant James Wilson, an Army engineer, and Alex Morrison, a civilian contractor whose background remained unclear even to Dr. Chen. All 3 had packed improvised gear and were ready to move immediately. 10 subjects total, Dr. Chen confirmed as they regrouped. "Everyone accounted for. Transport platform to the docking bay," Jake said, leading them toward the central transit hub. "We've got about 20 minutes before the facility lockdown, and I estimate 15 minutes to reach minimum safe distance once we launch." As they rode the platform toward the upper levels where the collection vessel was docked, Jake continued monitoring the facility's systems through his interface connection. The Zephyrians had organized response teams to investigate the emergency alerts, but they hadn't yet discovered that any subjects were missing. The confusion caused by the false chronometer readings was keeping them focused on technical problems rather than security breaches. The docking bay was located at the very top of the facility, where massive airlocks connected to external landing platforms that extended into the alien atmosphere. Through the transparent sections of the bay walls, Jake could see the collection vessel that had brought him to this world, a sleek, silver craft about the size of a commercial airliner, with flowing lines that suggested both speed and stealth capability. "There's our ride home," Captain Santos said with satisfaction. Jake approached the vessel's entry portal, using the authorization codes he memorized during his interface sessions. The portal irised open immediately, revealing an interior that was both alien and strangely familiar. The basic layout was recognizable as a spacecraft cockpit and passenger area, but every surface was made of the same responsive material as the facility's walls, and the control systems were clearly designed for Zephyrian neural interface operation. "Dr. Chen, I need you to examine the manual control backups while I try to interface with the navigation systems," Jake said as the group boarded the vessel. "Captain Santos, you and Sergeant Wilson check the passenger area and life support. Everyone else, find something to hold on to. I have no idea how smooth this ride is going to be." Jake settled into what was clearly the pilot's position, where a familiar crown-like neural interface device waited. As he lowered it onto his head, the ship's systems came alive around him, flooding his consciousness with status reports, navigation data, and flight control protocols. The vessel was fully operational, with enough fuel and life support to make the journey back to Earth. But the navigation computer was locked onto coordinates for another collection mission, and Jake would need to manually override the destination settings. "Manual controls are functional but limited," Dr. Chen reported from the co-pilot position. "I can handle basic flight operations, but complex navigation will require your interface access." Jake began modifying the navigation settings, inputting the coordinates for a solar system that he'd memorized from the facility's astronomical databases. The ship's computer initially resisted the changes, requiring authorization codes that Jake provided through his interface connection. "Hull integrity check complete," Captain Santos called from the passenger area. "Life support is operational for 12 individuals. Whatever these aliens breathe, it's compatible with human physiology." Through the interface, Jake felt the ship's systems completing their pre-flight preparations. Launch could begin immediately, but he wanted to implement one final element of his escape plan. "5 minutes to launch," Jake announced. "Dr. Chen, prepare to disconnect the docking clamps on my signal. Everyone else, secure yourselves, this might get rough." Jake used his interface access to implement the last phase of his facility disruption protocol. The emergency communication array began broadcasting its priority distress signal, sending false reports of catastrophic facility failure across the Zephyrian communication network. Within minutes, every available ship in the star system would be converging on the facility to provide emergency assistance. "Docking clamps released," Dr. Chen reported. "We're free to maneuver." "Launch sequence initiated," Jake said, feeling the ship's propulsion systems engage. "Next stop, Earth." The collection vessel lifted smoothly from its docking platform, rising through the alien atmosphere toward the star-filled void of space. Behind them, the Zephyrian facility shrank rapidly until it was just another geometric shape on the surface of a distant world. Jake felt a surge of triumph as they achieved orbit and engaged the faster-than-light propulsion systems. They had done it. 11 human beings had successfully escaped from one of the most secure alien research facilities in the galaxy. But their journey home was just beginning, and Jake knew that the real challenges still lay ahead. The transition to faster-than-light travel felt like falling through liquid starlight. Jake's consciousness, still linked to the ship's neural interface, experienced the universe compressing and expanding around them as the vessel's exotic propulsion systems bent spacetime to achieve speeds that defied human understanding of physics. "How long until we reach Earth?" Dr. Torres asked from the passenger area, his voice tight with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Jake consulted the navigation computer through his neural link. According to the ship's database, approximately 37 hours at current velocity. The Zephyrians had been planning another collection mission to our solar system, so the route is already programmed into their navigation charts. 37 hours, Jennifer Walsh repeated. After months or years in captivity, we'll be home in less than 2 days. The mood in the passenger compartment shifted between celebration and cautious optimism. Jake understood their hesitation. None of them could quite believe that their escape had been successful. The Zephyrian facility had seemed impregnable, and their captors had possessed technology beyond human comprehension. "What's our tactical situation?" Captain Santos asked, moving forward to examine the ship's control systems. "Are we being pursued?" Jake expanded his neural interface to access the ship's sensor array. The view that flooded his consciousness was breathtaking, a three-dimensional map of surrounding space showing their position relative to stars, planets, and other vessels within detection range. "I'm reading multiple ships converging on the facility we just left," Jake reported. "But they're responding to the emergency beacon, not pursuing us. Our cloaking systems are active, and we appear to be undetected." Dr. Chen leaned over from the co-pilot position to examine the manual displays. "These stealth systems are remarkable. We're essentially invisible to their sensors unless we do something to give away our position." "How invisible?" Sergeant Wilson asked with professional interest. "Are we talking radar stealth, or something more comprehensive?" "According to these readings, the ship bends electromagnetic radiation around itself across the entire spectrum," Dr. Chen replied. "We're not just hidden from their equivalent of radar, we're hidden from visual detection, gravitational sensors, even exotic particle detectors I don't recognize." Jake felt a wave of relief wash through the neural interface. The Zephyrians had designed their collection vessels to operate undetected in hostile territory, which meant they should be able to reach Earth without being intercepted by pursuit ships. But as the hours passed and they traveled deeper into interstellar space, Jake began to notice problems with the ship's systems. The neural interface was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, requiring more mental effort to process the same information. Warning indicators were beginning to appear in the ship's status displays, suggesting that prolonged human operation was causing compatibility issues. "Dr. Chen," Jake said carefully, "I'm detecting some irregularities in the ship's control systems. Can you take a look at the manual backup procedures? I may need to transfer primary control to the mechanical systems." She immediately began examining the backup controls, her expression growing concerned as she traced the various system pathways. "Jake, these manual systems aren't designed for long-range navigation. They're emergency protocols intended for short-distance travel only." "How short distance?" "Maybe a few light hours. The faster-than-light drive requires constant neural interface control for navigation corrections and course adjustments. Without that interface, we'll drop back into normal space automatically." Jake felt his concentration slipping as the neural interface became increasingly unstable. The human brain simply wasn't designed to maintain the kind of continuous connection required for interstellar navigation. He could feel the ship's navigation systems beginning to fluctuate as his neural patterns became irregular. "How far are we from Earth?" Dr. Kim asked, sensing the tension in Jake's voice. Jake forced himself to focus through the deteriorating interface connection. "Approximately 18 hours at current velocity. But I'm not sure I can maintain the neural link that long." "What happens if you lose the connection?" "We drop out of faster-than-light travel and continue toward Earth at sublight speeds. From our current position, that would mean about 40 years to reach home." Silence fell over the passenger compartment as the implications sank in. They had escaped from the Zephyrian facility, but they were still trapped by the limitations of their stolen ship and Jake's human physiology. "There has to be another solution," Captain Santos said firmly. "We didn't come this far to spend the rest of our lives in transit." Dr. Chin was studying the ship's technical manuals, which appeared as holographic displays she could manipulate through hand gestures. Wait. Jake, what if we don't need continuous neural interface for the entire journey? Could you maintain the connection long enough to program a series of navigation waypoints, then let the ship's autopilot handle the intermediate course corrections? Jake explored the ship's navigation algorithms through his failing interface. It's possible. The autopilot can handle routine course corrections for periods up to 12 hours before requiring neural oversight. If I can program a series of waypoints along our route to Earth, you could rest between navigation updates, Dr. Torres finished, taking shifts to maintain the interface connection. The problem is that I'm the only one who can establish the neural link, Jake said. And each interface session is becoming more difficult to maintain. Then we help you maintain it, Jennifer Walsh said suddenly. I'm a software engineer. I understand system interfaces and user experience design. Dr. Kim is a theoretical physicist who understands the mathematics of faster-than-light travel. Dr. Chin is an engineer who's already figured out their manual control systems. We may not be able to interface directly with their neural network, but we can support you through the process. Over the next several hours, they developed a system for managing the neural interface in shifts. Jake would establish the connection and program navigation waypoints while the others monitored his vital signs and the ship's status. When he reached the limits of his neural endurance, he would disconnect and rest while the ship continued on autopilot toward the next waypoint. The process was exhausting and mentally taxing, but it worked. Every few hours, Jake would interface with the ship's systems long enough to verify their course and program the next segment of their journey home. Between interface sessions, he rested while the others monitored their progress and maintained watch for any signs of pursuit. As they drew closer to Earth's solar system, Jake felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with apprehension. They were almost home, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their escape had been too easy. The Zephyrians were an advanced civilization with 3,000 years of experience capturing and studying other species. It seemed unlikely that 11 humans could simply steal one of their ships and disappear into space without consequences. 12 hours to Earth, Jake announced after his latest interface session. We're entering the outer edge of our solar system now. Any signs of pursuit? Captain Santos asked. Jake expanded his awareness through the ship's sensor array, scanning the space behind them for any indication that they were being followed. Nothing on sensors. But that doesn't mean we're safe. If they're using the same cloaking technology we are, we wouldn't detect them until they chose to reveal themselves. As if summoned by his words, the ship's threat detection systems suddenly activated, filling Jake's consciousness with urgent warnings. Multiple contacts were materializing around them, Zephyrian vessels dropping out of their own faster-than-light travel and surrounding the stolen collection ship. They found us, Jake said grimly. 5 ships moving to intercept. They must have been tracking us somehow. Through the neural interface, Jake could sense the alien ships attempting to establish communication with their vessel. The message that flowed into his consciousness was delivered in Sentha's familiar mental voice. Human subjects, you will immediately return to the research facility. Your escape attempt has provided valuable data regarding human ingenuity and determination, but it cannot be permitted to continue. They want us to surrender, Jake announced to the others. That's not happening, Captain Santos said firmly. How far to Earth? Still 12 hours. Too far to reach before they intercept us. Then we fight, Sergeant Wilson said. Does this ship have weapons? Jake explored the ship's systems desperately, looking for any defensive capabilities. Limited armaments, mainly designed for self-defense against small threats. Nothing that would be effective against 5 military vessels. The Zephyrian ships were closing in, their much larger vessels easily matching the collection ship's speed and maneuverability. Within minutes, they would be close enough to disable the stolen vessel and recapture the escaped humans. But as Jake watched their approach through the ship's sensors, he realized that the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They were so confident in their technological superiority that they had positioned themselves between the collection ship and Earth, exactly where Jake needed them to be for his final, desperate gambit. "Everyone hold on," Jake announced. "I'm about to try something that will either get us home or get us killed." Through the neural interface, Jake began overloading the ship's faster-than-light drive systems, channeling all available power into the exotic matter containment fields that made interstellar travel possible. The ship's safety protocols screamed warnings at him, but he overrode them systematically, pushing the propulsion systems far beyond their design limits. "Jake, what are you doing?" Dr. Chen asked as the ship began vibrating with barely contained energy. "Creating the biggest faster-than-light explosion this side of the galaxy," Jake replied grimly. "And using it to punch a hole straight through to Earth." The stolen collection vessel shuddered as its propulsion systems reached critical overload. Around them, the Zephyrian ships realized what was happening and began to pull back, but it was too late. The exotic matter containment failed in a cascade of unleashed energy that tore a temporary rift in spacetime itself. Jake's last conscious thought as the ship plunged through the rift was that they were either about to achieve the most spectacular rescue in human history, or the most spectacular failure. Either way, they were going home. Jake regained consciousness to the sound of helicopters and the feeling of Earth soil beneath his back. He opened his eyes to find himself lying in a field of desert scrub, with the familiar blue sky of Arizona stretching overhead. In the distance, he could see military vehicles and emergency response teams approaching their position. "Jake! Thank God you're awake!" Dr. Chen's voice came from nearby, and he turned his head to see her sitting beside him, looking exhausted but alive. Around them, the other escaped humans were picking themselves up from the ground, all apparently unharmed by their violent return to Earth. "Did we make it?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse. "We made it," she confirmed with a smile. "The ship crashed about 2 miles from here, but the emergency systems protected us during the impact. We've been unconscious for about 6 hours. Jake sat up slowly, marveling at the sensation of breathing Earth's atmosphere again. The air smelled of sage and dust, with the clean scent of approaching rain. After months of recycled alien atmosphere, it was the most beautiful smell he could imagine. "The others?" "Everyone's alive. A few minor injuries, but nothing serious. Captain Santos has been coordinating with the military teams that responded to the crash. Apparently, our arrival was detected by multiple radar installations across the southwestern United States." As Jake got to his feet, he could see the wreckage of the Zephyrian collection vessel scattered across a wide area of desert. The ship had been completely destroyed in the crash, but its alien materials were already being collected by teams of specialists wearing hazmat suits. "What about the Zephyrians?" Jake asked. "Are they still coming?" Dr. Chen pointed toward the sky, where Jake could make out the contrails of military aircraft circling at high altitude. "Unknown. But every radar installation and radio telescope in the world is watching for signs of alien activity. If they show up, we'll know about it." A military officer approached them, wearing the insignia of a colonel and carrying a tablet computer. "Mr. Mendoza? I'm Colonel Patricia Hayes, Air Force Intelligence. We need to debrief you and the other survivors immediately. The President has been briefed on your situation, and we have teams standing by to analyze everything you can tell us about your captivity." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They had brought back more than just their freedom. They had brought back intelligence about an alien civilization that posed a potential threat to Earth. "Before we start the formal debriefing," Jake said, "I need to know, has anyone heard from Dr. Elizabeth Chen at the Meridian Research Facility? She tried to warn me about the abduction, and she may have information about how the Zephyrians select their targets. Dr. Chen is safe and has been working with our analysis teams since your ships were detected entering Earth's atmosphere," Colonel Hayes replied. "She provided crucial information that helped us locate your crash site quickly." As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Jake reflected on how much had changed since he'd been a simple delivery driver worried about making his next appointment on time. He had seen wonders and horrors beyond human imagination, escaped from alien captivity using technology no human had ever accessed before, and brought back intelligence that could reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. But most importantly, he had brought himself and 10 other people home. The debriefing process took weeks, with teams of scientists, military officials, and intelligence analysts documenting every detail of their captivity and escape. Jake's experience with the neural interface technology proved particularly valuable, providing insights into Zephyrian capabilities that could inform Earth's defensive preparations. The wreckage of the collection vessel yielded materials and technology that would keep human scientists busy for decades. But more importantly, its arrival had served as irrefutable proof that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that contact with alien civilizations carried both tremendous opportunities and significant risks. 3 months after the crash, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed extraterrestrial contact monitoring station, built on a mesa overlooking the crash site. As the facility's first director of alien technology integration, he had been tasked with helping humanity prepare for the possibility of future contact with the Zephyrians or other alien species. Dr. Chen had joined the facility as chief engineer, applying her knowledge of Zephyrian technology to develop new defensive systems and communication protocols. The other survivors had been integrated into various research and military programs, their unique experiences providing invaluable perspectives on alien contact scenarios. "Any word from our visitors?" Dr. Chen asked, joining Jake at the observation windows. "Nothing since the crash. Either they've decided we're not worth pursuing, or they're planning something we haven't anticipated yet. Given what we know about their 3,000-year research project, I doubt they'll just write us off as a loss," Dr. Chen said. "More likely, they're studying our escape and preparing a more comprehensive approach to human collection." Jake nodded, watching as the sun set over the Arizona desert where his extraordinary journey had begun. The landscape looked exactly the same as it had on that Tuesday afternoon when he'd been making routine deliveries along Highway 191. But everything else had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and Jake Mendoza was no longer just a delivery driver. He was a survivor, an explorer, and a guardian standing watch for the next phase of human contact with the stars. In the distance, radar dishes turned slowly across the sky, scanning for threats and opportunities among the infinite points of light. And somewhere out there, Jake knew, other civilizations were watching and waiting, some benevolent and some decidedly not. But whatever came next, humanity would be ready. They had learned that the universe was vast and dangerous, but they had also learned that human ingenuity, determination, and cooperation could overcome even the most impossible odds. Jake smiled as he watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. He had delivered his most important package ever, himself and 10 other human beings, safely home from the depths of space. And despite everything he had experienced, he was already looking forward to his next delivery.